What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Beat of Business with me, Ravi Wadan. Today, we're going to be talking about the global chip shortage and why it's something you should know about. You might be thinking, oh, we have a chip shortage? Big deal. Or you might be thinking, it doesn't personally affect me, so why should I care? Or you might be thinking that this will only affect technology companies and it won't really have an impact on the broader market. If you thought any of these things, you should really watch this video. The global chip or semiconductor industry plays an enormous role in our day-to-day lives, and that role is only going to continue to grow over the coming decades. In this video, I'm going to be talking about what's causing the chip shortage, the short-term and long-term implications of the chip shortage, and then we'll talk about what's being done to alleviate the problems, and then I'll end with my personal thoughts on the whole situation. So make sure you tune in until the end. In one of my future videos, I'm going to talk about how I'm positioning my investment portfolio to take advantage of the growth I think this industry will inevitably encounter for years and years to come. Before we move on, I want to remind everyone to please like this video for the YouTube algorithm, and please be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you like videos on investing, emerging technologies, and emerging trends in business. If you've missed any of my past videos, you can go to my YouTube channel or you can go to my website, thebeatofbusiness.com. So what's causing the chip shortage? The global shortage can't really be pinpointed to one thing, but it is quite clear that the bulk of the supply chain issues are due to the COVID pandemic. So let's think about how our life has changed since the pandemic started. If you're anything like me, you've invested heavily in technology over the past year or so. Personally, my wife and I have bought 2 new computers, 2 new iPhones, a new computer monitor, an iPad, new audio and video recording equipment for my home recording studio, and new cameras for my Zoom meetings and for filming content like this. Now that may seem like a lot, but our use case is not as extreme as many American families and families around the world. With the rise of working from home and the rise of distance learning, we are spending more money on computers, cameras, displays, keyboards, smart TVs, and gaming consoles than ever before. In many cases, families realized that they didn't have as many computers or tablets as they needed, so they went out and bought more. In other cases, people realized that their existing electronics maybe weren't good enough and they just simply upgraded. People also subscribed to streaming services like Disney Plus or Netflix more than ever and realized that they wanted to upgrade to a smart TV to make the experience better. And if they didn't buy a smart TV, they bought devices like a Roku or an Apple TV or an Amazon Fire Stick to make their existing TV a smart TV. And what's the common denominator between all of these items? You guessed it, it's microchips. On top of us spending more time at home and having to go to school or work remotely, the pandemic also created many social changes. The average person or family spent less money on discretionary items like going out to dinner, or going out to the bar, or going to the movies. And this money that was saved further increased demand for things like televisions and gaming consoles. Many people thought, hey, if I'm not going out to dinner every weekend, I'm saving a bunch of money. Let me go buy a new TV or an Xbox or an iPhone. So who has been the hardest hit by the global chip shortage? General consensus is that the automotive industry has been the hardest hit by the chip shortage. You see, when the pandemic started back in March of 2020, automotive manufacturers did not anticipate demand being very high for the rest of the year. They were wrong and right at the same time, because what you saw was a short-lived decrease in demand when the pandemic first started, but then automotive sales came roaring back. Problem was that the automotive industry had already cut its forecast, and by doing that, had essentially told chip manufacturers to decrease production. But when sales came roaring back, all of their chip orders were essentially pushed to the back of the line, and now you have a major shortage across the industry. General Motors expects the chip shortage will cut its earnings by $1.5 to $2 billion this year. Ford Motor said that this situation could lower its earnings by $1 billion to $2.5 billion in 2021. Honda and Nissan expect to sell 250,000 fewer cars in the first quarter of this year due to the chip shortage. Like almost everything else that we use in our day-to-day lives, our cars depend on the semiconductor industry. Everything from our Bluetooth connectivity, our collision avoidance systems, our transmission, our all-wheel drive systems, and our infotainment systems all rely on a variety of different microchips. The automotive industry is the hardest hit, but the shortages extend to many products that we use on a day-to-day basis that rely heavily on microchips. Everything from phones to gaming consoles and PCs are feeling the pinch. The PC market, particularly the high-end gaming PCs, are feeling the pinch because they rely on dedicated GPUs. These hard-to-come-by GPUs have caused an inflated secondary market where massive premiums are being placed on their price. The broader gaming industry is definitely feeling the effects of the chip shortage as well. All of the major gaming console makers like Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony have struggled to meet demand for the consoles because of the supply shortages. This shortage has also created a premium in the secondary market for gaming consoles. Sellers on sites like eBay are selling the new Sony PlayStation 5 for double its $500 MSRP. Even when I purchased my new iPhone back in December, there was no inventory in the greater Seattle area. I had to drive about 80 miles south to get one. So I know from personal experience that this shortage has impacted the mobile phone industry as well. All right, let's talk about how the White House is getting involved. Now, the White House has pledged to address the ongoing global semiconductor shortage, with President Joe Biden said to be signing an executive order to conduct a supply chain review, along with developing a long-term strategy to avoid future shortages. On Thursday of last week, the CEOs of chip companies including Intel, Qualcomm, and AMD wrote to the president urging him to support domestic production and stop the country from losing its edge in innovation. The letter highlighted the fact that the United States' share of chip manufacturing has dropped to 12% from the 37% it was in 1990. You see, although many of the biggest semiconductor companies in the world are American, they don't handle the production. The production is mostly outsourced to Taiwan Semi and Samsung Electronics. Essentially, the CEOs of those US-based companies want DC to enact favorable manufacturing laws so that we can start manufacturing more of these chips that we heavily rely on right here at home. Although I agree with this sentiment for the long term, this doesn't solve the short-term problem that we are currently experiencing. So I'm interested to see what transpires here in the coming days. Now let's get my thoughts on the whole situation. I personally find all of this very interesting because I think the chip industry is going to be an integral part of our economic future. As you can probably tell after watching this video, our lives are extremely reliant on the semiconductor industry, and our lives are only going to be more reliant on the semiconductor industry with advancements in technology. I think it is imperative for the United States to find a solution to this problem before it gets out of hand. Although I believe in globalism, I don't think so much of our manufacturing should be outsourced. I think a larger emphasis should be placed on developing the infrastructure to support domestic production. At the current rate of technological change, I don't think this will be the last chip shortage of our lives, and if we invest in manufacturing, we will be much better positioned for the future. All of the emerging industries of the future, whether it's 5G or the Internet of Things or smart homes or autonomous vehicles, are going to rely on the semiconductor industry more than ever. And if we want to continue leading the world from an economic standpoint, it is imperative that we start working toward a supply chain solution now while the problem is still in its infancy. I understand that much of the shortage was caused by the global pandemic, but the reality is that how we've lived over the past year has changed the way that we will live over the course of our lives. The pandemic has made us all a little more tech savvy and has made all of us just a little more dependent on the conveniences that technology provides, and that's not a bad thing. I think the semiconductor industry is extremely well positioned for the future and presents a fantastic investment opportunity for those who seek it. And for that reason, I'm gonna do a video on my favorite investments in the space. In that video, I will take a deep dive into the technologies that will make their way into our lives and how the semiconductor industry is extremely well positioned for that growth of the future. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video and I hope you learned something new. Thank you for watching The Beat of Business and see you next time.